This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
So in the previous segment, we were talking about Chris Cuomo on CNN. I thought he was going to call out his brother Andrew Cuomo at one point, but he didn't. And you'll hear more of that coming up in the next hour. But this whole story about Andrew Cuomo and how he's been basically praised, adored, sainted by the mainstream media, the state-controlled media as it exists now. How did that ever happen? Well, he's a Democrat, Larry. That's it. They're all leftists. Well, that's part of it. But it goes deeper than that story. And joining us now is Christopher Bedford with the Federalist. Been trying to get him booked for this program for some time now on this very subject. Chris, glad to have you on board, sir.
It's great to be here.
So I was looking at the piece that you wrote, and this came out, I guess, about a week ago now because we've had trouble connecting. Andrew Cuomo didn't create the myth of Andrew Cuomo. Corporate media did. Go ahead, sir.
Now, it's been really frustrating to watch this unfolding, to read Politico or to read the New York Times or any of these papers covering this. You'd think that they had no responsibility to discover the truth, where they're saying Andrew Cuomo won an Emmy for his leadership. Andrew Cuomo literally wrote the book on COVID leadership. So
and he did write a book. He did write a book. You got to give him credit for that. He wrote it in October. He said in October, basically, leadership in COVID crisis as if he had solved it by October.
And I admit that I bought his incredibly farcical
Are you
poster.
kidding me? I hope the company paid for it, or did you put it on a business expense, I hope?
I thought this poster is going to be darkly funny someday when it comes out that what we've been reporting for months and months and months, it's been ignored by his brother, that's been ignored by the Emmys, it's been ignored by the New York Times, turns out to be true. This is going to be an example on how not to act for future leaders. That's exactly what's ended up happening with Cuomo. But they're all pretending that, we were tricked. I mean, if they had brought 1/2 or 1/10 of the amount of journalism they brought to shaming Ted Cruz, attacking his family, leaking text messages, following flight patterns, into the story of Cuomo killing their parents in their own state, then this actually could have been put an end to and exposed way before. But I think they had to wait until Joe Biden was in the White House before they felt comfortable turning it on Cuomo.
Well, the other point is there are Democrats that are inside the state legislature in New York, Congressman Kemp being one of them. They made it very clear that, they don't like Cuomo anyway. De Blasio doesn't like Cuomo. And so now maybe it's the idea is all the rats are leaving the ship or whatever. But now they're beginning to turn on him, and they're all acknowledging now he's always been a bully, and everybody knows it. I've never seen that reported either anywhere by any of the, quote, big name media groups.
Yeah, they've ignored it, and people are saying. I was on a Fox program with a Democratic analyst who said that this is an example of Democrats holding themselves accountable, and I had to laugh at her and say, we've been reporting on this,
right,
on this story on conservative radio, on conservative television, and conservative newspapers for months and months and months. It's happened. The New York Post was onto it early, as was the Federalist, the Daily Caller, and his story has kept on changing. At first, he said he didn't know anything about the order. Then he tried to blame the federal government. He blamed Donald Trump. Then he said that he didn't sign the order, and it's all very complicated. Then he blamed the media. He's even blamed his fellow governors. He said, quote, "You have 45 other states to point fingers at first." At any point, these reporters could have gone back and said, this is clearly not true. But they didn't. They didn't even begin to devote the resources to it. And they created this guy. They had him on the media. They called him a hero. There are really embarrassing, cringeworthy news segments you can go back through where they call him New York's boyfriend and all of our boyfriend and an example for leadership. He was held up as the exact opposite of Donald Trump in every way. And it turned out he was, because he was actually not leading very well during this at all.
You're listening to Christopher Bedford with the Federalist. You point out in your article about that March 25th order when Cuomo ordered the COVID-19 patients into elderly care facilities, barred the staff from even testing them before they re-entered, and 9 days later he pushed a provision barring the families from suing nursing homes over COVID deaths, hiding that in as you pointed out, a monstrous spending bill. And, of course, since then, he's also now turned around and blamed the nursing home staff for anybody that got sick in the nursing homes and even visitors when there were no visitors going into the nursing homes. Everyone gets the blame but Andrew Cuomo.
It reminds me of our governor nearby in Virginia, who, when he was caught either wearing blackface or dressed up like a Klansman, his answer to the public was, well, I'm going to make all of your kids take racial sensitivity courses. He punished every other kid in the state. It's like, imagine if you could do that when you were in high school and you got detention and you say, you know, everyone else stay behind. Sorry, everyone. And then you went home. That's what these governors do. They just go after But the press is trying to disassociate themselves. Joe Biden himself called Andrew Cuomo an exemplar of leadership and someone who he wants to be like as president. Now even the White House is backing away, saying, well, we support governors, and we want to give governors the resources they have because no one wants to stand next to them. But conservatives shouldn't assume that this level of accountability, well, necessary justice for all the people who've been hurt, for the people, Janice Dean's in-laws, who she's been fighting for, they will get justice. The next governor, when they get rid of him, is going to be probably the Democratic Attorney General or someone like her, who is going to be exactly more of the same for New York.
Well, but
so
she
unfortunately,
is the one. She is the one who came forward and said their investigation found that the nursing home stats were wrong, that they had misled the public and the state assembly and federal investigators on how many died in the nursing homes. So did she do that just being fair and transparent and doing her due diligence as an attorney general, or putting feathers in her political hat?
I would like to think it's the former, but I'm suspicious it is the latter. Based on the timing, it's hard to know because these investigations are done behind closed doors, as investigations typically must be in order to investigate at all. And we don't have full access to her timeline and what she was able to pull together, what she knew and when she knew it. But based on the timeline, based on now what this means for her future, and based on the way other Democrats who've long hated Andrew Cuomo, either publicly, like with de Blasio, or privately, like some of the assemblymen, coming forward, I do worry that it's political. And if you live in New York City, then I don't know how much, or New York State, I don't know how much respite you're going to get from this.
Well, also, you look at Merrick Garland, the nominee, Biden's nominee for Attorney General. During his nomination hearings, he was asked about the Cuomo investigation, and he basically said, well, that it would be carried out properly as it should be. At some point, it might come to our level. And he said, but I will guarantee you no one who's the principal in the center of the investigation should be investigated themselves. But I saw him basically doing a little two-step dance, not quite committing that, yeah, we will make sure the investigation is carried out, even though it would target Andrew Cuomo.
Yes, there was a lot of, there's always going to be two-stepping going on when you're talking in front of senators who are trying to either already have made up their mind to confirm you or maybe to oppose you. You always get that. But I saw an incredible amount of two-stepping yesterday from Merrick Garland and a little bit this morning, just giving answers that people wanted to, whether he would say on every single question that he would investigate any kind of right-wing attackers or any kind of white supremacists or this or that. But if you asked him about Antifa or the riots, he would say, well, we don't investigate ideology.
Yeah.
It was back and forth the whole time. And just the fact that he had said that he was not willing to commit to releasing the Durham report to the public when it was completed, that should be enough for Republican senators to vote against him unanimously.
And,
but I don't
there's
think
also
they will.
the question that he could not answer when Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri was asking about his belief, do we really want to keep our border intact? And we're going to deal with that in the second hour. But again, back to Cuomo, and as you pointed out in your article, again, titled Andrew Cuomo Didn't Create the Myth of Andrew Cuomo, the corporate media did. You pointed out that hospital ship, as I was saying before you joined us, was sent in, the USS Comfort, to New York, because Cuomo said we're going to need it for extra beds, and not one of the nursing home patients that were left from a hospital went to that hospital ship. They were still put into the nursing homes. So he never did utilize it anyway, and he clearly could have. But again, the finger of blame does not come back to me.
And the notorious Javits Center, too, which was turned into that massive field hospital, the huge fanfare. It was barely occupied. So there was room to find for people. This is not something like he has said that he was forced to do. He made the decision conscientiously to do what on its face, even when we didn't know very much about COVID yet, like we didn't really understand it in March, on its face seemed like a very, very, very stupid thing to do, to send people who had been deathly ill, who had not been tested, into a place filled with the frail and the elderly who were cut off from their family. On its face, it's just foolish. And he did it anyways. He didn't use other options. And he should be finally held accountable, but we'll see. I don't hold my breath for that.
Yeah, and it's certainly not going to happen when it comes to CNN and his brother Chris Cuomo on there as an anchor. Again, I want to thank you for your time, Christopher Bedford of the Federalist. We will do it again, sir.
Great. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Glad to have you, sir. Again, his article is in the Federalist titled, Andrew Cuomo Didn't Create the Myth of Andrew Cuomo, the corporate media did. Now, here's something else regarding Andrew Cuomo and the media coverage. You heard him mention, Bedford mentioning the Senator Cruz story, the trip to Cancun. Cruz says he's being targeted right now, not because of what he did, but trying to look away from Cuomo. Look away from Cuomo. Stand by, please.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter @LarryConnorsUSA.